Now, from Atlanta News First, the issues that matter to you. This is On the Record.
Either a Democrat or a Republican will become Georgia's next congressman. That is from the results of a special election held this week in Northwest Georgia's 14th congressional district. And that is the subject of our podcast for this week on the Record. With Atlanta News First, I'm Tim Darnell, joined by the host of On the Record with Atlanta News First, airing every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Atlanta News First. Rick Folbaum. Rick, big news this week. We had a special election in what will continue to be likely a months-long process to replace Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is represented Northwest Georgia's 14th congressional district for many years, shocking the political nation this past November when she decided that she was going to resign her seat, which became effective in January as a result of a very public and very bitter rift with President Donald Trump. We had a special election this week. We're going to have a runoff, obviously, in less than a month between Democrat Sean Harris, a retired Army Brigadier General and a farmer, and Clayton Fuller, who is the former district attorney for the Lookout Mountain Judicial Circuit. Now, Clay Fuller has the endorsement of President Donald Trump. We were watching as the results came in earlier this week on Tuesday night. Democrat Sean Harris, we thought that there might be a chance for a Democrat to make the runoff. I'm not sure anyone was expecting him to come in first.
Yeah, he did. I mean, and these are the final numbers. Harris getting 37.3% of the vote as a Democrat in a very conservative red district that voted for President Trump by over 30 points. Fuller coming in not too far behind him with just under 35%. And so, that's really, those are the end results, but it doesn't tell the whole story, as you said, because, to have someone like Sean Harris, who had run for this seat before, so he was a familiar name to voters in the 14th district. He had run against Marjorie Taylor Greene and lost. But for him to have built up this campaign for this special election and to have done as well as he did, I think that most analysts say that he overperformed in this contest. People thought that maybe he might do well, considering the fact that there were so many Republicans who were likely to split the vote, which is precisely what happened, that there was a chance, there was a path for him to make it through to this runoff. But for him to have come in first, I think caught a lot of people by surprise. Now, can he turn that into a victory in the runoff election on the 7th of April? That remains to be seen, and I think that the conventional wisdom is that he still faces a very uphill battle in order to win this seat in the runoff. But we should say that the runoff is simply to earn the right to fill the remaining months of Marjorie Taylor Greene's term, which only goes until January of next year. So he and anybody else who's interested will have to run again in another primary and then another perhaps runoff, and then the general election to fill that seat to have somebody win it for a full 2-year term. So we don't know exactly what Sean Harris's intentions are, whether he would automatically jump into the race. I think that probably he will, given how well he's done in this special election.
And it's interesting, this race, when Governor Brian Kemp first announced the March 10th special election, the initial kind of a jungle primary, so to speak, it drew 22 candidates. 22 candidates qualified. We saw almost immediately that field begin to narrow, and yet on the final ballot this past Tuesday, there were 17 candidates, more than a dozen Republicans, as I recall, 3 Democrats, 1 Libertarian, 1 Independent. Sean Harris was obviously the leading Democrat, having run for the seat before. And yet now, at the same time, this past week, we saw qualifying end for the May 19th general primary, and we saw some familiar names again qualifying to run on May 19th. Sean Harris has qualified, Clay Fuller qualified, Senator Colton Moore, former state Senator Colton Moore, qualified. Several other Republicans, including Jim Tully, who only earlier this week came out and endorsed Clay Fuller, as has President Donald Trump. So whoever wins this runoff in less than a month is going to have some competition come May 19th, regardless.
I mean, it really is fascinating to see how many candidates are interested in running for this seat and who feel like they have a legitimate chance of winning. I think it speaks to perhaps the spotlight that was put on Georgia 14 by the woman that held the seat for a number of years, Marjorie Taylor Greene. It used to just be a district that served Northwest Georgia, one of 530 plus districts around the country. But she certainly elevated it to one of national stature in that she, was so good at making headlines and getting herself in the news coverage. So that now, I think that it's seen as more than just a congressional seat, perhaps something a little bit more than that, and more importance when it comes to the strength of the Republican Party overall. This is really one of the early contests that shows us sort of where voters are in terms of how they feel about the Trump administration heading into the midterm elections. We've seen a number of other special elections in other states and gubernatorial races and other races that have shown that Democrats are faring quite well in these special elections. Does that carry over into the general election in November and beyond? I think that probably it does. It does spell good news, and it also exposes some of the vulnerabilities of Republicans and of President Trump, especially now with a war going on in Iran that polls show Americans across the board of all political stripes do not support in great numbers. Obviously, there are some who support the war, but it's not a very popular war at this point, and it has driven up prices at the pump, and Americans are still seeing higher prices at grocery stores when they go food shopping. And so all of these things are weighing on the minds of voters, and a lot of Republicans are beginning to get a little bit nervous about how they can turn things around between now and November so that they don't end up losing both chambers in Congress, both the U.S. House and the Senate. Their margins of victory, their margins of the majority are so slim in both of those chambers that there really is the possibility that they could perhaps lose both.
Let's talk about the Republican Party in the Northwest Georgia 14th Congressional District. We know we had more than a dozen Republicans on the ballot. State Senator, former outgoing, now I should say, outgoing State Senator Colton Moore, one of the more controversial legislators that we've seen at the state capitol over the past several years. Very highly publicized arrest last year outside the House chambers that we don't necessarily need to go over whether or not he was doing it as a matter of principle or simply as a way to get some publicity is a topic for another podcast perhaps. But it was this kind of a best case scenario for the Republican Party to have to kind of coalesce behind one strong candidate. Will leave the level of strength kind of that debate up to another day, but Clay Fuller, obviously endorsed by President Donald Trump, who was pointed out by the president when he came to Rome, Georgia, a week or so before the primary, and we have a candidate firmly with the backing of the Republican Party against a Democrat in a very heavily red GOP district. Was this a better case scenario rather than having two Republicans make the runoff heading into April 7th.
Well, I mean, it's a very interesting point. And a lot of times you'll hear from uh, political analysts and strategists that, that a candidate who emerges from a bruising primary battle is a stronger candidate in the general election. And so while this special election is not a primary per se, the fact that we had so many different Republicans who were vying for this seat, really did help, I think, to put a spotlight on those candidates, and the fact that Clay Fuller emerged victorious as he did. I think that a lot of people would say that that does help him out as we look ahead to the general election in November. But you mentioned Colton Moore. I was just in touch with him this morning. He is very much still eyeing that seat.
And he's qualified for
He's qualified to run for it in the general election in November. Well, in the primary,
Right.
We'll see if he makes it to the general election. But he's not going anywhere. But again, the whole point is that a candidate, when he or she faces a lot of competition from within his own party, it usually forces that candidate to really sort of bear down and tighten the messaging, and perhaps emerge as a stronger candidate. And so I think that it remains to be seen if this will be the case for Clay Fuller, who is really untested when it comes to these types of big political races, having served, as you said, as a district attorney, a prosecutor. But he's got a very compelling story. He is a cancer survivor, and I think that as voters get to know and hear more from him, in the days and weeks to come, that he has a real opportunity here to connect with voters, some of whom may have voted for some of the other Republicans in this special election. So he has a chance to pick up perhaps some of the support that went to someone like Colton Moore. But again, Colton Moore is not going anywhere. He actually got 11.6% of the vote the other night. Not enough, obviously, for him to win, but certainly not an insignificant number. And if he can build on that, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But I think that the Republican Party, has a real stronghold in Northwest Georgia. That has been the case for a long, long time. And I think that even while Sean Harris's story is a good one, a good story to tell in terms of, a Democrat being able to come out on top in this jungle primary the other night, I still think he faces a real uphill battle in his attempts to win this seat, either to finish out the remainder of the Greene term or to win it a 2-year term outright in November.
We're talking politics, Georgia politics here with On the Record with Atlanta News First. Again, I'm Tim Darnell, joined by Rick Folbaum. And a reminder to watch On the Record with Atlanta News First every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Rick, we have a major announcement coming up this coming Sunday with an expanded broadcast and a very prominent newsmaker. Tell us what we can expect to look forward to this Sunday at 11 a.m. on Atlanta News First.
So Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones is coming in to talk to us. Of course, he is a Republican in this race who is running for governor, and he has been endorsed by President Trump. And this is a fascinating race to watch because he was sort of cruising along. There are some other Republican candidates, of course, who are also running for governor. But given the fact that he had the support of President Trump, it was really seen as Burt Jones was really seen as the front runner and the presumptive Republican nominee. However, with the addition of businessman Rick Jackson just a few weeks ago, a healthcare executive, a billionaire, a self-made billionaire who, talk about compelling stories, was who lived in a foster home as a child growing up, and someone who has pledged to spend tens of millions of his own dollars, his own fortune, in order to win this race. He has really sort of turned that race upside down. And so it'll be very interesting to see what the lieutenant governor has to say about the campaign. There are some legal battles going on between them with different fights over campaign fundraising and dollars spent on campaign ads, and then a new defamation lawsuit that was brought by the Jackson campaign this week, and ads and messaging that he feels defames his character. And so there's a lot to talk to Burt Jones about, and my colleague and the co-host of our show, Doug Reardon, will ask him all of the important questions that everybody wants to hear the answers to. And as you said, we're excited that our show, which has been 30 minutes, is now expanded to an hour, of course, because there's so much to talk about now. We are officially in the thick of it, in an election year with so many important statewide races on the line to follow, and of course, all the congressional races and the competitive ones around our state. And so adding that extra 30 minutes really gives us a chance to really expand our coverage and talk more about the races, more about the issues that are important to our viewers all around our state.
Well, we're the site of the most watched special congressional election. Georgia will be home to one of the nation's most interesting and compelling governor's races, as well as a battle to see whether or not Democratic incumbent U.S. Senator John Ossoff will be able to win election to a second term. Georgia continues to be the site of the nation's most compelling political battles and developments, and we will continue to follow all the latest political developments here with On the Record with Atlanta News First. A reminder to watch and listen to all of our podcasts on YouTube, and also listen to on your favorite podcasting streaming platform, be it Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, or wherever you get and download your podcast.
Thank you for watching A&F Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and your community stories, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch us on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. To join the conversation on YouTube Live, visit our channel and hit subscribe. You can also listen to the Atlanta News First podcast by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.